Welcome to this circle. We're glad to be together this morning. At least I'm glad to be together with you this morning. On a cold morning, we can warm this room and warm this space with one another, because I'm not sure the furnaces are flicked on yet. So the job is ours, everyone. Again, welcome to those of you who have graced this circle many times, and to those of you who are finding yourself here for the first time, and anything in between. There's always a place in this circle for you. We do hope that you find what you need, the space to find what you need, and the warmth of this circle as we gather together. It's at this time that we've gotten the business of getting here out of the way, whether it's driving or walking or taking a bus or limping or crawling. We've gotten here. Now let's turn our attention to the task of being here, where we can forget all about the morning so far and just simply be present here in this moment, and we'll sing our way into that place. As we continue with our theme of finding habits for our hearts that help us to live full and balanced lives, we celebrate the light that is among us, the light that is within us, the light between us, the light that has been a part of our experience and the universe's experience since the beginning. It connects us, past, present, and future. And so as we bask in this light, may we join together in words that will gather us. If you would respond to my phrases with the words before you. In the midst of days that are full, earning, doing, cooking, driving, waiting, buying, and the countless other things that drive our time, we have brought ourselves into this time where we collectively pause and breathe and sigh to have a moment to open ourselves to the sacred. In a morning when we've stepped out of isolation and into community, we gather here to have a moment to open ourselves to the sacred. Where we've stepped into the long flowing river to be part of a timeless tradition of spirit seekers, to have a moment to open ourselves to the sacred. Knowing neither the answers nor most of the questions, we come to dwell deeply in the breadth of community wisdom, sacred story, and our collective compassion, to have a moment to open ourselves to the sacred. Wanting what is best for our earth, for our humanity, for our parents and children, our brothers and sisters, we seek the center of life, the care, compassion, love, and forgiveness that we see in wisdom teachers, in prophets and sages, in authors and poets, and most of all, in the journey of our own hearts, so that we may have a moment to open ourselves to the sacred. Now is a time that we call a time for all ages, and though in the summer we have few children gathering here on the carpet, it doesn't mean that the wisdom that we gather from children's literature and other sources is not worthy of sharing. And so today I want to share a Bantu tale entitled The Name of the Tree, and it's retold in this version by Celia Barker Lottridge. Once long ago, in the land of short grass, there was a great hunger. No rain fell and no grass grew. The ostrich, the gazelle, the giraffe, the monkey, the rabbit, the tortoise, the zebra, and all the other animals were hungry. They searched in the jungle, they searched by the river, on the great flat plain, but they could find nothing to eat. At last all the animals gathered together and they said, "Let us go together across the great flat plain until we come across something to eat." And so all the animals, except for the lion, who was king and lived in the jungle, walked across the flat, empty land. They walked and walked. After many days, they saw a small bump on the edge of the flat land. They saw that this small bump was a tree, and the tree was very tall, and the tree had fruit in it, such fruit as they had never seen before. It was as red as pomegranates, as yellow as bananas, as green as melons, as purple as plums, as orange as mangoes, and it smelled like all the fruits of the world. But the tree was so tall and the branches so high that even the giraffe could not reach the fruit. And the trunk was so smooth that even the monkey couldn't climb the tree. The animals sat on the ground and cried because the fruit smelled so good and they were so hungry. At last, when they were too tired to cry any longer, a very old tortoise spoke. "Oh, animals," she said, "my great-great-grandmother told me a story about a wonderful tree. The fruit of the tree was delicious and good to eat, but it could be reached only by those who knew the name of the tree." The animals cried out, "But who can tell us the name of the tree?" The very old tortoise answered, "The king knows. We must send someone to ask him." "I will go," said the gazelle. "I'm the fastest runner of us all," and that was true. So the gazelle started out across the great flat plain. He ran like an arrow shot from a bow, and as he ran, he thought, "How lucky the animals are that I am willing to go to the king. No one can run as fast as I." Indeed, it was not long before the gazelle reached the jungle and the place by the river where the king lived. And the king was sitting with his tail neatly wrapped around him. Every hair in his golden coat lay smooth and shining. Well, we know he's eating well, I guess. He spoke kindly to the gazelle. "What do you wish of me?" he said. "Oh, great king," said the gazelle, "all the animals are hungry, and we have found a tree filled with wonderful fruit, but we cannot eat the fruit until we know the name of the tree." "I will tell you," said the lion, "but you must remember, for I don't want to have to tell anyone else. The name of the tree is Ungali." "Ungali," said the gazelle, "I will run as fast as the wind, and I'll reach the tree before I can possibly forget." The gazelle thanked the king, began to run through the jungle. He thought about how happy all the animals would be, how they'd thank him and be grateful. He thought about this so hard that he didn't see a rabbit hole that lay in his path, not far from where the animals were waiting, and he stepped in it and went head over hoofs, over head over hoofs. He landed in a heap at the foot of the tree. "What's the name of the tree?" the animals shouted. The gazelle shook his head. He shook it again, but the name was gone. "I can't remember," he whispered. The animals groaned. "We'll have to send someone else," they said, "someone who won't forget." "I'll go," said the elephant. "I never forget anything." The animals nodded, for this was true, and so the elephant strode off across the flat plain. "I will not forget," she said to herself. "I can remember anything I choose to, even the names of all my cousins." The elephant had hundreds of cousins. When the elephant arrived at the edge of the river, the king was sitting in his usual place. "O king," said the elephant, "all the animals are hungry." "I know," said the lion. "And you want to know the name of the tree. I will tell you, but don't forget, because I'm tired of this and I don't want to tell anyone else. The name of the tree is Ungali." "I will not forget," said the elephant haughtily. "I never forget anything." And she turned and began to make her way out of the jungle. "Forget," she grumbled to herself. "Me, forget. Why, I can remember the names of all the trees in this jungle." And she began to name them. And when she'd finished the jungle tree, she went on to the other trees in Africa, and she was starting on the trees of the rest of the world when she happened to step in the very rabbit hole that had tripped the gazelle. She didn't trip, but her foot got stuck. The elephant pulled and tugged and pulled and tugged, and at last, with a great pop, her foot came out. The animals, who screamed at her, "What's the name of the tree?" were anticipating and excited. And the elephant said, "I can't remember, and I don't care. That tree's caused far too much trouble." And the animals didn't even groan. They were too tired and hungry. After a long time, the very young tortoise spoke. "Oh, animals, I will go find out the name of the tree." "You," said the animals, "but you're so young, you're so small." Have I got that right? Yes, I do. "You're so young, you're so small, and you're so slow." "Yes," said the very young tortoise, "but I know how to remember. I learned from my great-great-great-grandmother, the one who told you about the tree." The animals had nothing to say. And the little tortoise was already on his way. It was true that he was slow, but by putting one short leg ahead of the other, he crossed the great plain, went through the jungle, and arrived at the place where the king lived. The king was not in his usual place. He was pacing up and down the bank of the river, waving his tail, his fur standing on end. And when he saw the young tortoise, he roared, "If you've come to ask me the name of the tree, go home. I've told the gazelle, I have told the elephant that the name of the tree is Ungali, and I will not tell you." The very young tortoise nodded his head politely and turned and walked away. As he walked, he said, "Ungali, Ungali, the name of the tree is Ungali, 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 the name of the tree is Ungali." And he never stopped saying it, even when he got tired and thirsty, because that's what his great-great-great-grandmother had told him to do. Even when he fell right to the bottom of that rabbit hole, the very young tortoise just climbed out saying, "Ungali, Ungali, the name of the tree is Ungali." None of the animals saw him coming. They were sitting under the tree looking at the ground. The very young tortoise walked straight up to the foot of the tree and said in a loud voice, "The name of the tree is Ungali." The animals looked up. They saw the branches of the tree bend down so low that they could reach the wonderful fruit that was as red as pomegranates, as yellow as bananas, as green as melons and purple as plums, as orange as mangoes, and smelled of the fruits of the world. The animals ate and ate until they could eat no more. And then they lifted the very young tortoise high in the air and marched around the tree chanting, "Ungali, Ungali, the name of the tree is Ungali," because they did not want to forget. And they never did. In this ancient Bantu tale, we hear the wisdom that comes to us not as those who are specially equipped, not as those who are specialized, but as those who seek to put in the effort. This is the writing of a contemporary children's author. May we find wisdom for our living.
Good morning. This reading is from the Gospel of Matthew 25, verses 14 to 23, and it's from a translation I've never seen before, quite colloquialized. The spiritual life is like a man going off on an extended trip. He called his servants together and delegated responsibilities. To one he gave $5,000, to another $2,000, to a third $1,000, depending on their abilities. Then he left. Right off, the first servant went to work and doubled his master's investment. The second did the same. But the man with the single $1,000 dug a hole and carefully buried his master's money. After a long absence, the master of these three servants came back and settled up with them. The one given $5,000 showed him how he had doubled his investment. His master commended him. "Good work, you did your job well. From now on, be my partner." The servant with the $2,000 showed how he had also doubled his master's investment. His master commended him. "Good work, you did your job well. From now on, be my partner." The servant given the $1,000 said, "Master, I know you have high standards and hate careless ways, that you demand the best and make no allowances for error. I was afraid I might disappoint you, so I found a good hiding place and secured your money. Here it is, safe and sound down to the last cent." The master was furious. "That's a terrible way to live. It's criminal to live cautiously like that. If you knew I was after the best, why did you do less than the least? The least you could have done would have been to invest the sum with the bankers, where at least I would have gotten a little interest. Take the $1,000 and give it to the one who risked the most, and get rid of this play-it-safe who won't go out on a limb." This is a story passed down to us from the first century. May we find wisdom.
And another reading, this time a poem by Richard McWilliam entitled, "It's in the Building That the Job Comes Alive." It's in the building that the job comes alive, the hammering of nails, the grasping of wood rough-handed, the wind and chill atop a roof, snow blowing free across the fields, in a striding mass that whirls and encompasses, striking through the skin to exhilarate the heart. Each man to himself wrapped in elemental nature, together against the world. It's in the building that the job comes alive. How on a sunny day cement tangs air, water puddles the ground, a bee blows past, and in that moment, the contrast with the earth and heavy labor is so sweet, so sour, that life is held at the point of a pendulum unresolved, about to fall. These are words of a contemporary poet. May we find wisdom for our living. Some of you know I was recently on sabbatical, which meant I had many weeks to do some very different things in my life, and so one or two of those things were home improvement projects. I tackled two projects around the house on my sabbatical. One was the installation of a bathroom ceiling after there was water damage, and then so I had to tear down the drywall ceiling. But that was about a year and a half ago I did that. So the drywall needed to happen because I didn't want to look at those bare joists anymore. So that was one thing I did. The other was a project of emptying the front garden of plants and rocks and replacing them with grasses and bark. That was a bit more back-breaking than the ceiling, which I thought was impossible. But it was also shovel-breaking, too. Nouwen and I broke our good shovel on that job. That was fun. But it was over in a few days, so that was happy. I've got a picture of me with a hammer. My family accuses me of never being able to sit still and just relax, which is odd because I'm usually trying to sit still and just relax. But alas, I have trouble doing that. I have to be doing something. This is true. I know too that it's not just a genetic inheritance from my do-it-yourself father, who always had a part, a thingamajig, just the right something to rig into whatever he needed, and I seem to come by that honestly. But I know it's more than that. I know that there is for me a value in physical work that goes to the heart of my humanity. I do work on a daily basis that is sometimes very slippery, and some of you know what I mean by this. Some days are filled with tasks that are less about a completed project that one can look at, and more about whatever the opposite of that is. Visiting with people, or sitting down and having a conversation, or reading children's stories for just the right one. That kind of thing doesn't really often allow me to say at the end of the day, look what I did. It is difficult, as in many professions, to see a physical symbol or object of the work that's been done. And so I know that when I'm putting up a ceiling, or digging a garden, or installing something around the house, I'm plugging in a need to see some kind of evidence of my labor. But what of that labor? We have, it's Labor Day, so I thought I'd talk about work. We have a tricky relationship with work. When many of you choose to do a bit of physical labor, we're choosing to do that work, which is different, of course, from those who have no choice. Our culture regards physical labor with some degree of judgment. For some, it's looked upon as the lowest kind of work. Barbara Brown Taylor, in her book An Altar to the World, writes this: gardening seems to be acceptable, along with washing the car and working out at the gym. That's all good kind of work. But beyond that, the general idea is to make enough money that you can pay other people to clean the toilets and raise the food and trim the hedge. And typically the people who do these things for a living are at the bottom of the economic ladder. But the question I am exploring today is what should happen if we do leave no tedious work for ourselves? We need it. And I want to ask you this question. Have you ever known someone, or perhaps been someone like this, that's very quiet, maybe somewhat shy? Yourself a person maybe who doesn't easily strike up conversations, that's hard work? Have you ever noticed, if you are or know one of these kind of people, that if engaged in some kind of task, a conversation can strike up easier than if just standing face to face. If you're in that kitchen doing dishes with one another, sometimes the words flow a bit easier. If you're swinging the hammer next to someone on a habitat project, sometimes the conversation swings easier as well. I wonder if, like me, we don't take a lot of pictures in my house, so I have to make my own. It's a way to avoid embarrassment. But this is embarrassment of another kind, I suppose. I wonder, though, if you, like me, find that your mind is strangely clear when busied with some kind of mundane task. In my house, for me, the dirty dishes are those things. They don't get done, confession time, they don't get done after dinner. Because there's too many other things to do after dinner that seem more interesting than dishes. Or we're just too tired. That's also probably the truth. But in the morning, I can get going on the dishes. And in the repetition of grabbing a dirty dish, washing, rinsing, placing in the rack, somehow a part of my mind opens up to clarity. There is a meditative component about this. And that's true of probably many, many tasks. There's a repetition, and so a meditative component about the action. It doesn't take a lot of mental skill to do the dishes. Some of you can argue with me on that, particularly if you send it back for rewash. But we so busy ourselves with our body then, it lets the mind go. It lets it go in different directions. The same is true in the garden with weeds. The same is true of knitting, says my mother. I think it's why we think well in the shower. I have some of my best ideas there because I'm thinking about soap and shaving and not so much shampoo, but all those other things. There is, even in the most tedious of work, a value that opens us to an awareness of ourselves and our thoughts. For better or for worse, we start thinking. One of my favorite authors, Henri Nouwen, wrote a book called The Genesee Diary. He's a Dutch-born priest, was a Dutch-born priest. He's no longer with us. And spiritual writer. He offers this wisdom to us in this book. This book is his own journal of the 7 months that he spent at a Trappist monastery in upstate New York, where he fully participated in the life and the work and the prayer of the abbey and the personal spiritual struggles it revealed for him. A very short time after he arrived, he began doing 2 tasks every day, working in the abbey's bakery where they made and sold bread, and sorting and collecting stones for the abbey's new chapel. He writes this: "After 3 months of manual work, I'm realizing that I don't really enjoy it. When the novelty of it is gone, it becomes very boring. Packing bread, taking hot bread from the conveyor belt, washing raisins, ironing sheets, or collecting stones are all good jobs for 1 or 2 afternoons. But after 3 months, my main question during work becomes, when is this over? The only thing that can take some of the dullness away is a good-natured coworker. I told this all to John Eudes, my spiritual director, because I felt it was important to wonder how I could make my work more a part of my prayer and not just an occasion to fret. John Eudes could well understand my feelings. To my amazement, he said that many, in fact most monks, especially the older ones, really enjoyed their work and did not feel as I do. Oh. John showed me that this type of work gives me a good occasion to feel deeply my unrelatedness. In other situations, I have intellectual defenses and strong repressions which prevent me from really feeling what I'm feeling. When I study, write, or lecture, I can make things interesting by manipulating them in certain ways, by copying and pasting, by doing a lot of things. But in the bakery or in the creek, it's practically impossible to make things interesting. And then I'm faced with just a job to do and nothing else. And then I discover my deep alienation and my deep loneliness. If I really felt related to my world, really a part of it, I wouldn't complain about dullness and boredom. Manual work indeed unmasks my illusions. It shows how I'm constantly looking for interesting, exciting, distracting activities to keep my mind busy and away from the confrontation with my nakedness, powerlessness, mortality, and weakness. Dull work at least opens up my basic defenselessness and makes me more vulnerable. I hope and pray that this new vulnerability will not make me fearful or angry, but instead open me to the gifts before me. The whole book is full of wonderful writing like that. It's really great. Another story. It's like a man going on a trip, entrusting his valuables and fortunes to his servants. We heard how this master gives them all incredible sums of money, each according to their abilities. 2 of them double their money, and the third one was afraid and put it in the ground. And when the man returns, when the master returns, he rewards the 2 who've put the money to use, and with the third he questions that fear and timidity and takes away even that which was given. It makes me wonder what we learn from putting ourselves and our ideas to work, utilizing whatever resources we have. There is more than making the monthly bills and doing what is necessary to get by and carrying on with the routine. Just as there is more to our simple actions, our repetitive, mundane, boring work that we have to get to at some point, or else the laundry piles up and the dishes do too. There's more than just doing a job. You know, I don't read this as only about the mundane tasks. I read this about the frustration that we have with some of the work that we do, whether it be tedious or mundane or very important work. Frustrations will come, surely. They're always there. But you know, this parable is not just about a return on investment, that we must make something of our work, grow our profits, etc., etc. If it were only that, we could learn what we need to know by taking an investment course and opening an online account. But read 5 interpretations of this story, and 4 or 5 of them will focus upon the return on investment that these servants come back with. It's about putting your talents, your gifts, your finances, your money to work. But there's more to this story. I look at the sums that they're given. And they're given according to their abilities, the parable says. They all had abilities and were given not just a bit of money to test them. This isn't a little quiz. So the story goes, they're given vast, huge, unimaginable sums of money. Even the lowest amount, which in the original story says 6,000 silver coins, comes to about 20 years' wages for a common laborer. That's the least that someone was given. So these are vast sums given to trusted and able people. And it's not just an investment lesson. If it's not just that, then what is it? And we look to the actions they took. They are all proven workers, so what kind of effort will they go to? What effort might it take to double their funds? What kind of effort is needed in whatever venture is engaged? And we compare that to the effort that it takes to hide a bag of money in the ground. Digging a hole can be hard. It breaks shovels, I know. But seriously, hiding a bag of money isn't very hard. This becomes a story to counter the image of work that many of us have received from our culture, from other stories, from fairy tales, that somehow labor is a curse. Somehow an unintended part of our life, something from which to be rescued. But this story challenges that. Tending the earth was, in any story, in any version of early humanity, man and woman's first task. It doesn't matter what traditions, creation stories we read about the tending of the earth. It's the source of all things, after all. Food, water. Without tending, sustenance just ain't going to happen. So it's vital to life. We need that tree of the world's fruits. And to get it, we can't forget how much effort it takes. I wonder if this parable could be a parable that suggests the value in the effort involved in life, that turns this idea that work is to be looked down upon. Those who labor with their hands down in the dirt are somehow lower than those who can just think about it. There is some reward, whatever that is, small or large, to that which has us doing these jobs that simply take time, that simply get our hands dirty, that create a blister or two, that place us in a position to access a part of our conscience that we don't usually quiet down enough to explore. My kids and my family are not unlike anyone's. If left to their own devices, they might play on their own devices all day long. And on our short little vacation this summer, there were still phones and screens with movies and apps and games. And here's my observation. And I'm sure it's true of me too. There's a direct correlation between time spent in front of a digital apparatus and nasty moods and snappish behavior. I know it's true for me too. When I fight with my computer too long, I start fighting with humans. And when the invitations outside or to participate in some kind of work are finally heeded, or perhaps, kids, look out the window, darn it, there's nature out there. It's amazing the transformation. My kids don't necessarily love that I think this way, but yes, mowing the lawns and pulling the dandelions and raking and going for long bike rides is a ticket to better moods and a happier family. And a more calm family disposition as well. Go figure. Work allows a more positive and cooperative mood. The work that happens around your homes and around here, for that matter, a place that provides opportunity for the same kind of effort, the weeding, the cleaning, the organizing, the putting up and the tearing down of chairs every Sunday. This is the work that would be easy to dismiss as, sure, a great help, But one more thing to check off the list. Phew, that's done. Instead, what do we find when we look deeper into what those tasks and that effort means to us and to our well-being? We find it builds community. We find it makes us better people. Because we start getting out of our own selves. Sometimes the work comes as a necessity, offering little choice but to work until it's cleaned up, fixed, completed. Other times, work presents itself to us as a drudgery which we might turn into soul work, a habit of the heart. By opening ourselves to choosing the labor rather than resenting it. However the openings come, they offer us the chance to bear the reality of our world in the flesh, in our flesh, to take that difficulty on right where the blisters form, and try to look on them with a view toward their benefit, toward how they might lead us into the more of life. As Henri Nouwen said, I'd better start thinking a little more about my attitude toward work. If I have learned anything this week, it is that there's a contemplative way of working that is more important than praying, more important than reading, more important than singing. I'm discovering more and more that I have not learned yet to make the work of my hands into a prayer. On this Labor Day weekend, may it be so for all of us. May all our work, whether joyous or tedious, may we make that work into our living prayer. And may it be so in so many ways. As we go today, let us share words of blessing that we will give to each other, that we will take into the world and into our week. Let's share these words to strengthen our intentions for living. If you'd respond with the yellow words, please. In caring for one another, may we be untiring. In challenging one another, may we be respectful. In sheltering one another, in holding one another, may we be tender. In the expectations we have of one another, may we be realistic. In the songs we sing with one another, may we seek harmony. And in loving one another, may we be all these things and more. As we seek to live more nearly as we pray,